The 5-minute interval. The deadbolt was Elias's religion. He lived alone on the 4th floor of an aging apartment complex known for its thin walls and transient tenants. Every night at 10 p.m., Elias performed his ritual. He would check the windows, ensure the stove was off, and finally approach the front door. It was a heavy, solid oak door, the only redeeming quality of the apartment. He would grip the cold brass thumb turn of the deadbolt and twist it hard to the right. Ka-chunk! The sound was satisfying. It was the sound of safety, of a barrier between his sanctuary and the chaotic world outside. He would then tug on the knob 3 times just to be sure. It never budged. Last Tuesday began like any other night. The rain was hammering against the glass of his living room window, a rhythmic drumming that usually lulled him to sleep. At 10 p.m., he went to the door. Ka-chunk! Locked. He tugged the knob, secure. Elias turned off the lights and retreated to his bedroom, the glow of the street lamps casting long, shifting shadows across his ceiling. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain. He was just drifting off when he heard it. It was a sound that didn't belong in the sleeping building. It came from the living room, crisp and metallic, cutting through the noise of the storm. Snick! Elias's eyes snapped open. He knew that sound. It was the distinct, sharp click of the deadbolt's tumblers disengaging. He lay frozen, his breath caught in his throat. Impossible, he thought. I locked it. I checked it 3 times. Rationality tried to take over. Maybe the old mechanism slipped. Maybe the humidity from the storm affected the springs. He slowly pushed the covers aside and crept out of bed, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The living room was bathed in gray gloom. He approached the front door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the deadbolt. The brass thumb turn was vertical, unlocked. A cold chill, colder than the draft from the window, washed over him. He reached out with a trembling hand and twisted it back hard to the right. Ka-chunk! He stood there for a moment, staring at the brass metal, willing it to stay put. He backed away slowly, keeping his eyes glued to the door, and sat on the edge of his worn-out sofa. He looked at the digital clock on his cable box. 10:15 p.m. The silence in the apartment was now heavy, suffocating. The rain seemed distant. Elias waited. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but the air felt charged, expectant. He watched the minutes tick by on the clock face. 10:17, 10:18, 10:19. At exactly 10:20 p.m., 5 minutes later to the second, it happened again. Elias watched, paralyzed with primal fear, as the brass thumb turn slowly, smoothly rotated to the left, all by itself. Snick! The door was unlocked. Panic seized him. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was deliberate. He scrambled off the sofa, grabbed a heavy wooden dining chair, and jammed the back of it under the doorknob, wedging it tightly against the floor. It was a desperate, clumsy barricade. He retreated to the far corner of the kitchen, grabbing a large chef's knife from the block.
He felt ridiculous holding it, shaking in his pajamas, but terror had stripped away his dignity. He kept his eyes fixed on the door, praying the chair would hold against whatever was on the other side. He glanced at the microwave clock, 10:23 p.m. 2 more minutes. The wait was excruciating. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. The wind howling outside sounded like a voice pressing against the keyhole. 10:24 p.m. "Come on, Elias, get a grip," he whispered fiercely to himself, his voice cracking. 10:25 p.m. Snick. The deadbolt was unlocked for the third time. And then the doorknob slowly turned. Elias gripped the knife until his knuckles turned white. The heavy oak door pushed inward. The wooden chair groaned under the pressure, its legs scraping loudly against the floorboards, screeching in protest. The door opened an inch, then 2, fighting against the makeshift barricade. Through the narrow gap, Elias couldn't see the fluorescent lights of the hallway. He saw only profound, impossible darkness. A thick, inky blackness that seemed to spill into his entryway like smoke. And with it came a smell. Not the smell of the old hallway carpet, but the stench of damp earth and something ancient and spoiled. The pressure on the door increased. The chair was bowing, about to snap. Elias didn't scream. He couldn't. He just watched as 4 gray, elongated fingers, too long, with too many joints, curled slowly around the edge of the door frame, gripping the wood, preparing to push the door wide open. And then the movement stopped. The fingers remained there clutching the edge of the door. The darkness swirled in the gap. The clock flicked to 10:26 p.m. The 5-minute window had passed. The thing outside didn't try to enter further. It just held the door ajar, waiting. Elias is still sitting in his kitchen corner, the knife shaking in his hand. He knows that in 4 minutes, at exactly 10:30 p.m., the cycle will begin again. And he knows that this time, the chair won't be enough.
The soil at the threshold. It wasn't a sound that woke me up. It wasn't a scream or the shattering of glass or footsteps on the porch. It was something far more invasive. It was a smell. I sat up in bed, the darkness of my room pressing against my eyes. At first, I thought maybe I had left a window open and the scent of a coming storm had drifted in. You know that smell, petrichor, the scent of rain hitting dry earth. It's usually comforting. But this was different. This was thick, heavy. It didn't smell like fresh rain. It smelled like stagnant water, like wet wool and rotting roots. It smelled like deep, overturned earth, the kind you only smell when you are digging a hole 6 feet deep. I looked at the digital clock, 3:17 a.m. The silence in the house was absolute, but that smell was screaming at my senses. It was getting stronger. I slid out of bed, the floorboards cold under my bare feet. I walked into the hallway. The air here was thicker, humid, as if I had stepped into a greenhouse in the middle of winter. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. I made my way toward the living room, toward the front of the house. The source was undeniable. It was coming from the front door. I stopped 10 feet away. My front door is solid oak. It has a heavy-duty deadbolt and a chain. I live alone, and I am careful. I know for a fact I locked it. I remember the click of the metal. I remember sliding the chain. From where I stood, the door looked secure. The chain was still taut across the gap. The deadbolt knob was turned horizontal. It was perfectly locked. But the smell, it was making me gag now. It tasted like copper and mud in the back of my throat. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the door, where the wood meets the threshold, there is a weather strip. It's supposed to keep drafts out. It's supposed to keep bugs out. But something was pushing through. In the faint light of the street lamp outside, filtering through the window, I saw movement, a slow, agonizing ooze. It looked like black sludge. It bubbled silently through the microscopic gap between the door and the floor. It wasn't water. It was too granular. It was soil. Wet, loose, graveyard soil. It was spilling into my hallway, defying gravity, piling up like an anthill against the welcome mat. "Hello?" I whispered. My voice shook. No answer. Just the silence of the house and the overwhelming stench of old dirt. I took a step closer. I had to see. I had to know if someone was dumping this outside, playing some sick prank. I reached the door. The pile of dirt was growing faster now, covering my toes. It was ice cold. I put my eye to the peephole. I expected to see a person, a vandal, maybe even a monster. But I saw nothing. Not empty space. I saw nothing. The peephole was completely black, blocked. It wasn't paint. I realized with a jolt of adrenaline that stopped my heart that the darkness was pressed tight against the glass. It was earth. Someone hadn't just dumped dirt on my porch. Based on the pressure against the door, the entire world outside was buried. I pulled back, gasping. I grabbed the handle. It was freezing cold, vibrating slightly. Thump. A soft, wet sound from the other side. Thump. Like a fist hitting a coffin lid, but from the outside. The soil at the bottom of the door began to flow faster. It wasn't just leaking anymore, it was pouring. The pressure was forcing the wood to groan. I backed away, stumbling over the rug. "Stop it!" I yelled, losing my composure. "Go away!" The deadbolt didn't move. The handle didn't turn. The lock was doing its job. It was keeping the door shut. But the door wasn't the problem. I watched in horror as the soil started to seep not just from the bottom, but from the keyhole. A thin, worm-like stream of mud extruded from the lock, dropping onto the floor with a wet plat, plat. Then I heard the scratching, not on the wood, but inside the lock mechanism itself. The sound of grit grinding against the tumblers. The smell was suffocating now. I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller. The air was running out. I ran to the window, desperate to break it, desperate for fresh air. I pulled back the curtains. Dirt, pressed black and tight against the glass. I am not in a house anymore. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how deep I am. The front door is perfectly locked. It's keeping the intruders out, but it's also keeping the grave in. And the soil, it's starting to rise above my ankles.
The fever in the brass. The heat wave broke records that day.
Even at 3 in the morning, the air in the old Victorian house hung thick and motionless, like damp wool blanket wrapping around my face. I was awake, of course, lying in bed, listening to the old house settle. Usually, those sounds are comforting, the wood contracting as it cools, but tonight, nothing was cooling down. The silence felt heavy, pressurized. And then I heard it. It wasn't a creak, it wasn't the wind. It sounded like circulation, like great volumes of fluid being pumped through tight pipes deep within the walls. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was the old plumbing protesting the heat. But then the smell hit me. Faint, metallic, and uncomfortably warm, like dry blood on hot pavement. I needed water. My throat felt like sandpaper. I swung my legs out of bed, the floorboards sticky against my bare feet. The hallway outside my bedroom door was pitch black. The only light came from the weak street lamp filtering through my bedroom window behind me. I walked to the bedroom door. It's an old door, heavy oak, with one of those antique, ornate brass doorknobs. Cold, solid metal. That's what I expected. I reached out in the dark, wrapping my hand around the knob. I snatched my hand back with a hiss. It was searing hot. Not warm, hot, like a kettle that had just boiled. My first thought, the rational thought, was fire. There had to be a fire in the hallway. Adrenaline dumped into my system, clearing the fog of sleep instantly. I crouched, touching the wood of the door itself. It was warm, yes, but only with the ambient heat of the night. There was no smoke curling under the frame, no crackle of flames. Just that impossible heat concentrated in the brass handle. I stood there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to open that door. I had to know what was on the other side. I pulled the sleeve of my t-shirt over my hand for protection. I reached out again, moving slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. I gripped the knob through the fabric. The heat was intense, bleeding right through the cotton. But as I gripped it, I realized the heat wasn't the worst part. It moved against my palm. I froze. I pressed my ear against the heavy oak door. Silence. I squeezed the knob tighter, trying to understand what I was feeling. The metal didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt taut, like skin stretched to its breaking point over something swollen. And then I felt it again. Thump, 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 thump. A rhythm, strong, steady, and undeniably organic. The doorknob wasn't vibrating mechanically. It was pulsing. It was beating like a feverish heart inside a brass cage. Horror is a cold thing, usually. It freezes you. But this was a hot terror, a sickening, violating heat. I backed away from the door to the center of my room. The air seemed thicker now, harder to breathe. It tasted like copper. I looked around my sanctuary, my bedroom. It felt alien. The floral wallpaper looked slick in the dim light. I stepped closer to the wall. It was sweating. A thick, translucent slime was beading on the paper, running down in slow rivulets. I put my hand against the wall. It was warm, and faintly, deep beneath the plaster and lathe, I could feel the same thing I felt in the doorknob. Thump, 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 thump. The whole house was throbbing in time with that brass heart on my door. I looked back at the exit. The knob seemed to glow now, a dull, sullen red in the darkness. The wood around the escutcheon plate was warping, softening, looking less like grain and more like bruised tissue surrounding an infection. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. Dead. Of course it was. I was trapped. The window was painted shut years ago. The only way out was past that door. I stared at the knob. It was beating faster now, matching my own panicked heart. It knew I was terrified. It was feeding on the heat in the room, feeding on my fear. I realized then that I wasn't looking at a haunted object. I wasn't looking at a door heated by a fire. I was looking at an organ. The house hadn't just gotten hot tonight. It had caught a fever. It had woken up. And I was barely a splinter caught in its throat. The brass knob turned slowly, all by itself. The handle was hot. It pulsed like a heart. And now it was opening from the other side.